So I usually don't record videos of myself because I hate watching myself and I hate listening to my voice. Ever since I was probably, I don't like watching myself past the age of 9. It just kind of makes me cringe. But I've decided that today it's important for me to actually speak. Um, So, as probably a lot of people know, April is Autism Awareness Month, and I've started seeing things on my feed, and I have a lot of mixed feelings about Autism Awareness Month because it doesn't really make people more aware of what autism actually is. It's just saying, oh, let's support this cause, but do you really know what you're supporting? And see, the thing is, when you have any sort of movement, it when you have any sort of movement, led by people for rights, like gay rights or Black Lives Matter, or walk for breast cancer, or something like that. Those movements usually have the people who are being marginalized or are, trying to cure some disease at the forefront of those movements most of the time. Well, at least that's the way it should be. The problem with Autism Awareness Month is that people who are actually autistic are not at the forefront of that. It's, let's all do something for people with autism, but you don't see people with autism, really leading that movement and having a voice. And that's because I think a lot of people still don't really understand what autism is. They don't understand it's a spectrum. They think that autistic people are voiceless and they're incapable of speaking for themselves, so they have to have other people, spread awareness for them, and that's not true. So that's why I have problems with it. I mean, if you haven't guessed already, this is important to me because I am on the autism spectrum, which a lot of people, are surprised and they're like, "Oh, but you don't act autistic." And that's exactly the problem, is that people don't understand that autism is a spectrum. I am personally, when I was young, I was diagnosed with PDD-NOS, which is basically defunct now because it's a spectrum disorder. There's really no point in labeling it, but basically they said that, you have some aspects of autism, but we're not going to place you under an Asperger's label because you don't meet all the criteria for that, and you're not low functioning, so we're not going to place you there. But I don't like using labels. I don't like, high functioning versus low functioning. It's just very ableist, and it's a spectrum. It truly is. The thing is that, not one autistic person is alike, just like everyone is different. And you run into sorts of things. But I think the problem with Autism Awareness Month is that society has painted this image of autism as a disease. And this has been perpetuated by organizations such as Autism Speaks, which there has never been an organization more opposed by the people it's actually supposed to serve than Autism Speaks. It's just, they present autism as a disease, and the bulk of their funds is going to a cure for autism. But the problem is, autism isn't a disease. It's not AIDS. It's not cancer. It's not something that, needs to be. It's not something that needs to be cured, but they handpick in their marketing, they handpick, the worst case scenarios of children with like the worst behavioral issues, and just they paint it as this awful, awful thing to have, to the point where used they used to be. And they might still be, but they know it's unpopular now. They were once publicly anti-vaccination because parents are so afraid of their kids having autism that they would rather have their kids have measles, which, it just sounds utterly ridiculous. But that's so you have these organizations like Autism Speaks leading Autism Awareness Month when they're trying to find a cure for autism, and meanwhile people who are actually autistic are like, I don't need to be cured, I don't have a disease. Like why are you trying to get rid of me? um so I think it's hard for people to fathom, but they're like, oh, but autism, like, people can't talk and they're weird, like, don't you want to be normal? And it's like, yeah, there are, because, most people are neurotypical, as, in the disability community would speak. It is hard to, fit into society, but it's not like we're incapable. It's not like, there are all new sorts of ways that, we've been able to meet, to blend into neurotypical society. And some people, have started to get the message that, they have to meet us halfway. Like, we, like, my whole life is, I think people are surprised when they hear I'm autistic, because it's like I seem more normal, but it's like that's after a lifetime of therapies that made me repress a lot of aspects of myself. And it's like, you shouldn't have to do that because it's exhausting. It's like, hopefully we're making steps so, autistic society and neurotypical society can meet each other halfway. And it doesn't leave autistic people doing all the work. Um, but I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that even though everyone with autism is different, I feel like one thing that we all have in common is that we often feel like we don't belong, that we're on the periphery of a community. I feel like my whole life I've always, tried to find that niche, and it's like no matter where I go, I never completely fit in. If I, the short 15 minutes I'll have where I feel like I belong to a group will be shattered soon later. It's just kind of hard when you always feel like you're at the periphery of things, like you don't feel like you like truly and fully belong there. You always kind of sort of feel like the odd guy out. And so, and I think that's so sadly represented by the fact that even in our own month of awareness, we are on the periphery. We're the passive. We're not the assertive. Where, everyone's like, oh, we can do this for you, and assuming that, we're incapable of speaking up for ourselves. Um, and I mean, that's just a common pet peeve of mine, is just feeling infantilized when people automatically assume that, because you speak a certain way, or because you're clumsy, or, are literal, that, you're not, you don't have intelligence, or you aren't capable of, speaking for yourself, and, making important decisions for yourself. And some people can't do that, but that doesn't mean that, they shouldn't have agency over, presenting themselves. You know what I'm saying? So it is bothersome that people, people who are actually autistic are not at the forefront of their own movement, which is the problem that I have, with these months. And I'm not saying it's bad, to be supportive, but I'm just saying it doesn't really help us, because for adults living with autism, the whole thing for us is like, we want visibility in society. We don't want to be discriminated against. I don't tell people about my diagnosis when, I'm so lucky to have a job. I just, every day I'm just so grateful and so blessed, and it's just miraculous. But, when I was applying for, jobs, whenever they ask you if you have a disability, I always say I prefer not to answer, because even though they're not allowed to judge you, it's like, I just always hear about preconceived notions. And it's always kind of like a do or don't. Like, every day I'm just kind of like checking myself, like, is my autism showing? Is my autism showing? And it's just, it's tough, and it's stressful, and it's like we have to hide. And it's just really frustrating when, people assume you can't speak for yourself. And, yeah, I guess the point I was trying about, it's like, it's fine to be supportive, but, like, listen to autistic people. Don't, Autism Speaks uses a puzzle piece as their logo, which I think is funny because it's like that puzzle piece is the missing link of all the autistic people they should have on their board, helping make decisions, because it's like everyone just listens to like psychologists or CEOs or parents of children with autism, but they don't listen to the people who are actually autistic, which is why the name Autism Speaks is such a hilarious irony. Um, and some of these organizations do good. They like try to help. They mostly help families with coping technologies, but it's like you have this whole populations of adults now that we didn't grow up at, like it's still kind of coming into its own. We're still trying to figure out what is the spectrum. So a lot of people that were never officially diagnosed or didn't receive the support they need, and autistic adults are just kind of thrown to the dogs, and it's like it's a struggle that never ends. And I think I'm sick of and tired of this popular image of the the unruly horror child with autism that all the parents are so afraid their children are going to become through vaccines. And that's not true. And even if it were, like, do you really have such disregard for people that are different than you that you would rather have your child have measles? So I guess the point I'm trying to make about this month, and I know a lot of people are just going to ignore this. It's just really sad because, whenever people speak out against, Autism Speaks or misconceptions about autism, they're silenced. Like last year, my grad school was doing a program with Autism Speaks, and I, just posted on their event page saying, like, actually, as a person with autism, like, I don't support this organization. This organization doesn't help me, and they deleted my post. And it's just like whenever we try to speak out against it, we're just silenced. So my advice to you is that just listen to autistic people and don't get defensive when we tell you that these organizations aren't actually helping the majority of us. Like people will just kind of like, if I say something, they'll just kind of like cringe at me and be like, yeah, whatever. Like it's just a perfect example of like you're not really helping autistic people by raising money for them that goes to like a kid, and like I said, there are organizations that do good and are more about intervention and bridging that gap and helping people get jobs and stuff, and that's good. But I'm saying I'm mostly speaking about Autism Speaks, and when you just throw your money at it, that's just going to research that's trying to get rid of people, I guess, and that's not helpful to us. So it's so just listen, just hear what we have to say, and just ask. Like, don't be afraid to ask. I know sometimes, and I've run into this in the autistic community where people will get very holier than thou and angry if people don't know something, and I'm not like that. I don't believe in that. I believe in educating people is the only way we'll get rid of ignorance. So just ask. Like, seriously, I don't I don't mind explaining to people. It's just kind of frustrating when people just kind of want to live in their paradigm that autism is this horrible disease that needs to be cured. And it's like, here I am. Hello. So yeah, that's just my message for Autism Awareness Month, and I hope you listen, and if you choose not to, well, I don't know, I'm not good with words because I have autism. Huh?